I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Wayne McRoy. Be sure and check out my films out in the streaming universe. Doors of Perception is on Amazon Prime. Occult Louisiana is on Tubi, Roku, Apple, and more. We're working on film number 3. If you'd like to make a donation for our film fundraiser, we have links right in the description. Anything is greatly appreciated. This one's going to be a little different than the previous two, a sci-fi comedy mockumentary. We're having fun with this, featuring myself and many of your favorite researchers, authors, and content creators. Today, I want to welcome back to the show Wayne McRoy. He is an author and researcher who explores the hidden agendas linking modern technologies to their ancient alchemical roots in antiquity. Wayne, welcome back. How you doing?
Good to see you, Chris. Doing well, my friend. It's been a while since we've spoken. Good to be back on.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much for coming back on. Looking forward to getting into your new book, The Enoch, Polarity, and the End of Time. A deep exploration into the hidden occult world surrounding us, and as you call it, the embedded synchromistic metadata within this realm that's used to psychologically and spiritually steer humanity. There's a lot of interesting information to get to. You've presented this a few times, but you've gone deeper in your new book, so we're looking forward to getting into that deep level of exploration about the nature of reality. Before we do, let the audience know a little bit more about yourself and let them know how they can find out more.
All right. If anybody's looking for me, they can find me at my website. That's www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. I have been doing the circuit here lately quite a bit, the talk show circuit, promoting my new book and everything here. It's a lot of interesting stuff. There's a lot of interesting depth and detail in what's being presented here, because we are looking at these standard archetypes that these power players in this world use for control and manipulation of this reality, oftentimes at levels that most people aren't even comfortable talking about, because this has to do with reaching into the bounds of the spiritual realms and steering and manipulating things from there. And all of this has to do with our connection through the etheric portion of this reality. So that's primarily what I've been focusing on here lately, is looking into that. But if people aren't familiar with my work, check out my podcast over at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. All kinds of interesting topics all the time. I go really deep into the esoteric with a lot of the different things, places most people won't touch with a 10-foot pole. I talk about that. So, like, it's something that's outside the bounds of your normal quote-unquote conspiracy topics and stuff like that. I reach deep into the spiritual machinations behind things and really try to suss out all of that stuff.
I really appreciate your work. You've done some fantastic research and deep dives. Before we get too deep into this current book, maybe we could get a basic synopsis. What brought you to this?
Okay, well, it's an interesting story, really. I've been actually beating the drum for a while now about a topic that I call synchromistic metadata. Now, that's the name I've applied to this phenomenon that's happening. And what this is looking at the zeitgeist, the greater information field, and picking out bits of disparate information that seem to connect in many different ways that defy logic or reason. And this has been explored by other people out there too, this synchromistic tie into things, how it seems like this seemingly unrelated thing keeps cropping up in the greater information field over and over again. So I've spent the greater part of my adult life trying to reverse engineer this as best I can. So what I've done is I've applied names to the concept, and this concept I call synchromistic metadata. Now, these are the little disparate bits of information that you see out there in the greater information field around us, which everybody seems to agree that exists, but they just disagree on what to call it. I like to refer to it as the zeitgeist because there's certainly a spiritual component to it, and zeitgeist simply means spirit of the time. Now, other people in other different categories of study will refer to this as the Akashic record. If you look into occultism, they'll refer to it as the collective unconscious if you look at it from a psychological observation point. If you're looking at it through the scientific lens of observation, they call it epigenetics or some such thing as that as far as this information. So this information field exists, and there are those that would refer to it as the quantum information field. I hate the term quantum, but it's one that we're kind of saddled with all the time because it helps to describe this in better terminology. But certainly this information field exists, and there is information in that field that could be readily recognized by the unconscious human mind that oftentimes we miss on a conscious level. This is the nature of what I call the synchromystic metadata. Now, oftentimes this looks like random things that somehow seemingly align in certain aspects and point in a certain direction. So as a perfect example of this, my podcast partner on the show Synchromystic that I do with Richard Willett, Richard and I, we explored this avenue of thought going back the beginning of last year when all of a sudden this genetic engineering company came out called Colossal Biotech, and they announced that they re-engineered the dire wolf.
Yes.
Remember that story,
yes.
Chris? Well, if we pick apart the details in the zeitgeist at that time, we find that all of this was talking about Romulus and Remus and the founding of Rome, the new Roman Empire. And what are we seeing unfolding in the Western world right now? It's the unfolding of the new empire. There's even talks about the U.S. annexing Greenland right now, and we just invaded Venezuela and kidnapped their president in the dark of night. And so all of this whole notion of empire, plus then shortly after that broadcast, the Pope died, and a new Pope was elected, and wouldn't you know it, it was, for the first time ever, an American Pope. So this is the reemergence of the Roman Empire, and Richard and I pointed all of this out way back then before it all came to being, and now we're seeing this unfold. And we did this based upon the synchromystic metadata we saw out there in the greater field, in the zeitgeist. And now, coming back full circle again, Elon Musk is back in the news because back then he was also in the news at that time because he had revealed that he secretly had a child with a woman named Ashley St. Clair, and guess what that child's name was? They named the child Romulus. You can't make this up. Doesn't that seem a little peculiar?
That's a great example of how this stuff shows up in our reality. I never really pieced together the genetic dire wolf experiments with symbology of the Roman Empire and what's coming about. That's a great example.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that I've been exploring here, and all of this has to do with this Enoch polarity, as I've talked about. And now we're seeing more confirmation of that. Like I said, this whole thing Richard and I talked about early last year with Elon Musk's child being born, and it's named Romulus. Well, he's back in the news claiming that he's going to try to get custody from the mother now of this child named Romulus. So it's interesting how it comes full circle, and we're seeing the emergence, the greater emergence of empire on the world scene in real time here. And we talked about it back then and pointed out this is exactly what this is pre-echoing. So this is the kind of stuff that you could determine by looking at these synchromystic cues out there. So that's what we've done. And I wrote this book, The Enoch Polarity, and I was in the process of writing that throughout the course of the entire year. But there were certain pieces of the puzzle that weren't falling in place for me yet at the time. So I was still working on it. And I finally just finished it here right around the beginning of December, and I released the book in December at an appropriate time. And now we're seeing a lot of the things manifest, but the whole point here is this is actually what I was looking for. I was looking for information to try kind of reaffirm this whole notion of synchromystic metadata when I encountered what I now call the Enoch polarity. It's something that kind of fell into my lap. I wasn't looking for it, and I was trying to write a very different book than what this one turned out to be at the time. But sometimes these things align in a way where it takes precedent. And this took precedent because it's talking about something very important. So just to bring us up to speed with this, why is it called the Enoch polarity? Well, this has to do with, if you go back and you look at the Bible, the stories in the book of Genesis, most people have heard of the figure of Enoch, right? You've heard of Enoch, and we're familiar with the book of Enoch and some of the stories being told about Nephilim giants and the Watchers and all of these things, the fallen angelic host, and how they corrupted mankind. But what you don't understand and what you don't largely hear about is, did you know that in the Bible there are two Enochs? There's an Enoch that we're familiar with that comes from the godly line of Seth, and then the firstborn of Cain after his exile from the garden of, or from from Mount Eden, when after he murdered his brother Abel, his first child he named Enoch, and he built a city named Enoch in the land of Nod. So this is wherein the Enoch polarity comes in. There's two Enochs, and these are important archetypes to understand, especially when you explore the roots of where it is that Cain was exiled to. The land of Nod is not accepted to be an actual literal place by most historians and theologians who explore this avenue of thought. They've never found what is called the land of Nod in the Bible. So there's this connection to the underworld with the land of Nod, because this ties back to the Rosicrucian cosmoconception and stuff too. And this is what I spent the early part of the book really breaking down, is laying down this cosmogony so people could understand what I'm trying to lay down here. So the land of Nod is kind of this semi-mystical place. And when you actually look at the root of the word Nod and where this notion of the land of Nod comes from, you find that what this means etymologically is the land of the sleepers. So this infers kind of a dreamlike reality or existence. So what I was able to piece together is it appears that at the time of Cain's expulsion from Mount Eden, from the rest of his brethren, when he was sent out to wander the land, he was sent down to the plains of Shinar. And at that time, the world was still in a state of, how should we say, almost primordial chaos from the original creation event in the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. And I talk about all of this in the book because this relates to different flood myths and flood stories that we have as well. And there are actually 4 different flood events that we have that we could see recorded in the scriptures and elsewhere. The 4th one hasn't come yet. This one's a flood of fire. So this is an interesting concept I also lay down that applies with this archetype of the 2 Enochs. So back to the beginning portion here. So what we're talking about is there's 2 Enochs. There's the Enoch that was the son of Jared, that was from the godly line of Seth, which came later after this first Enoch, who was born of Cain, and he built a city named Enoch. And some people think that the city and the son of Cain, Enoch, are one and the same thing. And you come to find out from delving deep into some esoteric sources, one of which, and this is where I actually really began to go down the trail, one of those esoteric sources that gave me a whole lot to go on to find the trail here for all of this was Tracy Twyman.
Wow.
She put out block shavings about alleged channeling communications she had through a specialized Ouija board that she made, her and her former husband at the time. And they claim to have been able to communicate with the spirit of Cain in the underworld. And he revealed a lot of different stuff about this land of Nod and the city of Enoch and some various other important bits of information that really caught my interest. So I started exploring those depths of trying to find some of that information and the sources of that information. And that led to the conclusion that I reached with this Enoch polarity. So the Enoch polarity is this whole concept of duality bound up in the fundamental building blocks of the etheric portion of our world. And it's an archetype. There are 2 Enoch archetypes. One, the Enoch of the land of Nod, of the underworld, because this is what's truly interesting, and this is what sent me down this road. You find out from this channeled information, this alleged channeled information from Tracy Twyman, from Cain in the underworld, that the city of Enoch in the underworld is kind of like a central home base that is a city, and it's shaped like a black cube. And this is what immediately sent a light bulb off in my head. And then I started exploring the other side of the polarity. And if people aren't familiar with the other side of the polarity, this would be the Kabbalistic tradition that Enoch was transfigured into the angel Metatron, and that he travels the cosmos through the various spiritual worlds and through the various realities in a vehicle called Metatron's cube, which is a white cube, and it is symbolically associated with the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation in the Bible. So you have this black cube in the underworld and the white cube from the heavens that's supposed to descend on the day of judgment. And this is where the whole Enoch polarity set in for me. So here's the thing. When you think of a black cube, you know what immediately came to my mind when I first found out, okay, this city of Enoch that exists in the land of Nod, which is in a centralized portion of the underworld, or the abyss, as it's commonly referred to by some in the occult. It's a black cube. Well, immediately in my mind, I thought back to about 15, maybe 20 years ago now that it's going on, with the introduction of a adiabatic quantum computer called D-Wave. You remember D-Wave? Well, it's shaped like a black cube. This is immediately what came to mind. So I began to connect the dots and find that perhaps this artificial intelligence development notion and the use of quantum computing as a portion of that has something to do with the spiritual reflection going on in the abyss, in the underworld, in the lower spiritual realms, if you want to call it that. And there's a connection between those two things. And certainly this seems to be front and center today in this technological age we're in. So all of this has to do, once again, with this breakdown into these polarized types of viewpoints. So it's all about this dualistic system. You always have two sides to every equation here. So you have the good side and the bad side. You have the analog version and the digital version. Now, this black cube in the underworld represents the digital version of everything, the digital version of reality, of nature. Analog is the natural version, and this is represented by the white cube, representing the New Jerusalem, or Metatron's cube, if you want to call it that, in the Kabbalistic tradition. So you have these two polarized figures here representing the polar opposites. And what's going to happen is, in this day of judgment that is said to be coming, these two cubes, and I'm speaking highly symbolically here because this is all something that will occur in the etheric portion of this reality. It's not going to look anything like what we can envision it on a symbolic level here in the real physical world that we are familiar with our five senses. It's going to happen in the etheric. But at some point, when this day of judgment, or this time when all of this begins to unfold and be unveiled, these two cubes, the black cube of the underworld, will ascend from the underworld, and the white cube from heaven will descend from heaven, and they'll meet in the middle here, and they'll open up. And this is when we will see a drastic reset in this world.
So it's possible that all of these fantastic metaphysical tales and stories from our ancient past and biblical stories is representations of events that are unfolding in the etheric realm that have physical effects in the material realm, as above, so below. As the things unfold in the material, it has a reflection in the etheric realms, vice versa.
Right, exactly. You're kind of picking up what I'm putting down here. Now, here's the thing. This is why I spent a good portion of the beginning part of the book to break down cosmogony, because in order to have a good understanding of this, you need to understand how the Rosicrucians describe this reality, how we have these different layers or planes of existence, if you want to call it that, through which these various worlds interact. And there's this stepping down process to physical manifestation here that occurs. So human beings, in essence, according to the Rosicrucian system, as well as the Earth itself, they have 4 different vehicles of operation. They have the dense physical body we're familiar with. That's us here, that we experience this world of our 5 senses with, the physical body. They also have an etheric body, which is a subplane. The etheric plane is a subplane of the physical plane, but it's of a finer material or a finer substance that can't really be readily quantified as well in the physical sense that we're familiar with. Now, this etheric body or etheric form is the connection to the spiritual worlds. The next step up in the spiritual worlds would be what is referred to largely as the astral world. So this is the first step or manifestation into the spirit from the world of form here. So we have the physical, the etheric, the astral, and then the 4th state is called the mental plane or devacanic plane. And this is the ontological self, the I am within man, the I, the self. This is where consciousness reflects down into physicality from. Now, this mental plane, this devacanic plane, works as a mirror, as a reflecting of the higher spiritual realms into the lower. And I take a great deal of time to really break this down and even put some charts and stuff in the book to help express what this is to people so they could better understand. So it all has to do with manifestation in the physical. So what had occurred to me doing a lot of this research is all of these things that have been talked about in terms of end times prophecy and in the book of Revelation and all of this. What you need to understand is when we get these descriptions being given in the book of Revelation, that is John the Revelator, what he's actually observing in the spiritual realms. So this is not stuff that's going on in the physical world that he's describing. And this is where people oftentimes misinterpret things, because you get a lot of Christians that are literalists. They're biblical literalists. And they think that all of this stuff is going to literally express how it's been described. But what they don't understand is John the Revelator is seeing what's happening in the spiritual world and is trying to describe that to people. And how it will unfold in the physical world here may look entirely different than what's unfolding in the spiritual.
Yes.
That's what I'm expressing here as well. Because by and large, what this is when we're describing some of these end time scenarios, this is all going to unfold in the etheric portion of this physical reality with its connection to the spiritual. So things from the spiritual will come through the etheric, and it will effectuate changes in the physical world here. But first, things are going to happen in the etheric. And here's wherein the huge piece of the puzzle fell in place for me. What I realized from going through the works of Rudolf Steiner and others is that there's often a time delay from when things happen in the etheric and when their full expression occurs in the physical paradigm here. So with this time, those who can actually see these things in the spiritual, they could describe what's happening in the spiritual, but it may look totally different than what anybody would expect when it actually happens at that time in the physical.
This makes me think about the cases of people who claim to have been involved with black projects or the secret space program, and they are transported to different realms, supposedly. They interact with different beings, and I'm wondering if somehow these people that claim to be victims of this program and believe that they're going off-planet to fight aliens are somehow being shifted into these etheric realms, and that's what they're experiencing.
Well, that's very possible, and I haven't ruled that out as a possibility. Of course, making claims like that, this is something that you can neither prove nor disprove, really. So it makes it very hard for us in our modern ways of thinking to really wrap your head around. But the metaphysical side of it is what's important here, because the metaphysical side of things has not been lost on these controllers of this world right now. In fact, there's a lot of them that understand metaphysical principles much better than the average person, and they're able to actually leverage these to their advantage in certain ways. And we've seen a lot of that going on. So essentially, when we understand that maybe that is what's going on with these people, I don't know. I don't have the answers as far as that stuff goes, but the etheric side of things is wherein the first steps into physical manifestation occur. So it's a stepping down process from the spiritual worlds into the physical world, and the etheric layer is the important conduit or gateway there. And the body of man, the etheric body of man, is the stargate between worlds. And I know we may have touched on some of this stuff before in the past.
I often wonder, like you said, how aware some of these technocrats and globalists are of the spiritual side of things. I think for the most part, most of them have very little awareness. They believe that they are doing something beneficial for the world. They've been brainwashed into multi-generational psychopathy, but there must be at some level an awareness of what's happening in order to manipulate it to such a degree that it has been.
Well, yeah, I would agree. I think there are some people in this world that have a better grasp of all of that. But overall, the overarching thing that's really come to my attention is there's a beyond human intelligence that guides and steers and directs a lot of this. And that's the important portion of this, because they have an ulterior motive. Their motivation is not the same as what these people, these dark occultists who run things in this world, that's what I like to call them. There's this division of power. You have at the topmost levels these dark occultists who run things, and just beneath them are their minions, the technocrats, who by and large, they don't have any clue about any of this metaphysical stuff. They just think they're doing something good. They're lining their own pockets, and they're hedging their own bets, and they're bought into the hyper-materialist paradigm, wherein all things could be explained away as some physical cause and effect sequence, even things like consciousness, and this is what they bank on. They explain consciousness away as nothing more than the electrical, chemical activity of the brain and brainstem, and that's a misnomer. Consciousness exists outside of form, and this is wherein you have to understand, like the Rosicrucian cosmogony and things like that, to get a firmer grasp of what's going on. Now, these dark occultists who run things are well aware of a lot of this, and they leverage these principles, and they would like very much that the public at large be totally ignorant of all of this, or think of it as silly and nonsensical. So that's what they do. But beyond these dark occultists who run things, from the other side, from the spiritual side, there are these powers, intelligences, entities, however you want to view these, that are effectuating changes in this world through these metaphysical principles. And a lot of this reflects in what I call this synchromystic metadata that goes on. Because think about it. How in the world would a human being coordinate all of these things, like this company engineers the dire wolf, right? And the Romulus and Remus story. And then all of a sudden, at the same time, Elon Musk names his newest child, his 14th child, by the way, important number there. He names him Romulus in the heart of this. And they name those dire wolves Romulus and Remus as well. And you have all of this stuff, and it just occurs at the same time, and it's all disconnected, right? I mean, at a physical nuts and bolts level, you look at it, it's all disconnected. It's a coincidence. Most people would chalk it up to a coincidence. Well, how do these coincidences play out in such a manner that there's these synchromystic connections? I would argue there's a higher than human intelligence or a beyond human intelligence that could manipulate things from the other side to put all these pieces in place. And that's why we have things like synchronicities or synchromystic experiences.
Do you think that synchromystic metadata is possibly showing up in high-impact events, like, for example, the Charlie Kirk assassination and the Snake Eyes movie?
All the time. And I think we've discussed this stuff on air before.
Yeah, a little bit.
This kind of stuff happens all the time, and it's not a coincidence. It goes beyond coincidence when this occurs over and over and over again, especially with these high-impact news stories that always seem to occur. There's always this little bit of information tied in there.
And those numbers that show up, those Masonic numbers that show up in news reports, those most likely aren't knowingly put in there, but they're showing up through the field. Is that accurate?
Exactly. And how is it that they keep showing up? Is there a human being? Is there a group of human beings sitting in a boardroom?
Yeah.
Let's put a number.
Some people think that.
Some people do think that, but that goes beyond logic to think in that way. It's unreasonable to think that there's some big committee, and don't get me wrong, there's the Committee of 300 and all of this stuff that does have an actual physical nuts and bolts side to it that does occur. But by and large, these people who run things, these ones that have a lot of influence in this world, are influenced by these spiritual entities on the other side as well. Mm-hmm. And that's where they sometimes seemingly coordinate their efforts, even though they're not really working purposefully towards the same thing. It's on the other side that this has been engineered, the spiritual side. And this is something that most people aren't comfortable to talk about. And that's where I'm trying to like really break through and make some headway, because most people that get caught up in this conspiracy culture, if you want to call it that, they're all about, well, it's the Freemasons, it's this, it's that, it's the Jews. You know how they all talk. They all try to blame one specific people group, and it's not a human being pulling the strings. Behind the scenes, there's other things going on. And there are some human beings that may be in the know with stuff that are being used or putting forward the agendas, but they're only a piece of the puzzle. On the other side is where the coordination goes on the spiritual side. And this is what's happening right now. And the important battle right now is a spiritual battle. That's what's at the heart and soul of all of this. We're in a spiritual war. It's a spiritual battle. And this battle is largely occurring in the etheric portion of reality right now. And most people are completely and totally disconnected from all of that, understanding any of that.
Yeah.
Because this is where the influx will come from the spiritual side. So it's a war going on.
If you take a step back and look at biblical scripture and most theological beliefs about the end of times, it's very similar the way everything unfolds, but there's ultimately a battle between good and evil where the evil is trying to completely infiltrate and hijack everything that is good and essentially take it over. It seems to be this parasitic intelligence. We can see that manifesting in humanity right now. If you look at how much of our morality has degraded over the decades and what we are accepting of now compared to just 10, 15 years ago, that indicates that there is some anti-human influence affecting the collective in major ways. And it's at such a slow pace, we don't notice it happening until we look back and see how our grandparents acted compared to the way the young kids are acting today.
Exactly. It's a slow roll. It's a slow process, but it is a deliberate process, and it's being instituted by these entities from the other side. And I kind of explore this different avenue of thought, this way of thinking in the new book, because all of this is actually encoded all over the place when you look.
It's like they live when you put the sunglasses on.
It's and I haven't been able to take my glasses off, Chris.
Yeah.
It's really, once you know this stuff and you see this stuff, there's no turning back. That's why anybody who's new to this stuff, hey, if you don't really want to know, if you would rather go down the ignorance is bliss road, go for it. Don't even lift up the veil and look under.
Yeah, it's a tough road just starting out, becoming aware of the nature of our reality. There are so many layers to peel through. By the time you get to the layer that we're discussing now, you've already heard some of the craziest things you could ever hear. So you're a bit initiated and ready to hear some of these deeper things, which I believe my audience is. But it's got to be tough navigating this stuff just waking up to it.
Oh, no doubt about it. It's a long process for most people. And that's one of the things I try to be mindful of. So I try to simplify everything as best I can. And if there's a concept that's happening that I can't quite express in words, I'll invent a name for it. That's one of the things I do. That's why I invented the term synchromystic metadata. It describes these various bits of information we see that are seemingly unrelated, but they both point in the same direction, and they give you important clues about things to come. A lot of people will call this this type of thing in the conspiracy culture, they call it predictive programming, or it's also called by the occultists revelation of the method. you see all of this when you could put these dots together that are out there in the information field. You connect the dots and you see a pattern emerge. Well, I've seen enough patterns now that it's become quite evident to me the things that are going on. And the important portion of this, like I said, this battle that's going on right now is a spiritual battle, and it's happening in the etheric. And this leads down the road of the teachings of a guy named Rudolf Steiner. When you look into many of his lectures, he talked about the etheric double of man, the doppelganger. Are you familiar with that concept?
A bit,
Chris?
but for those that aren't, could you go over that a little bit more?
All right. Well, in the early 20th century, Rudolf Steiner and several others from the secret schools and the mystic fraternities, for some reason or another, they received, I guess, orders from on high, if you want to call it that, for lack of better terminology, that it was time to reveal to the public the existence of the etheric double. Now, this is something that was only known by high initiates of the various secret schools and fraternities in many, many centuries past. The disclosure of the existence of the etheric double was not something that was largely accepted in the public, in the mainstream, until disclosed by Rudolf Steiner and others. So this etheric double, essentially what this is a soul being that is incarnated when you are actually conceived. When you are conceived, an etheric double attaches to you, and it exists in your nerve impulses, according to what Steiner says. Now, this is not a being with a spirit, but it does have intelligence and will. It is a soul being. It's a double of yourself. It's your etheric body, your etheric form. And it shares space with you in the physical world. Because remember, the etheric portion of reality is a sub-layer of the physical plane here. So we have this etheric double in attachment to us, and oftentimes it's associated with sending us negative impulses or negative types of things, responses, emotions, stuff like that. It wants us to explore our animal nature, our physicality more. It wants us to appease our desires. Remember, it's a soul being. Steiner describes it as a soul being, but it lacks a spirit. So it is not like an ontological person. It's not like the ontological self, the I within man, the I am. It's devoid of that. It has no spirit or animus to it, but it exists, and it kind of parasitically exists within the human being. Now, what I've discovered is that this etheric double is the key to everything going on right now, because these dark powers on the other side, what they want to do is they want to hide within that etheric double these spirits. So they've been attaching themselves to people more readily because something occurred. And this would, you'd have to go back and look at the works of Steiner as well. He talked about a war in heaven that happened, a battle between Michael, the archangel, and the dragon that began to occur in the early portion of the 1840s. And this war in heaven ended in 1881. And this is wherein, at that time, something happened, and some of these darker forces were let loose into the etheric portion of this reality. And he equates those events that happened, that ended, this battle in the heavens that ended in 1881, to the onset in the physical world of World War I. This is what clued me into the time delay aspect of this, between the actions in the etheric and in the physical. So when you look at that, you realize something was loosed on the earth at this time into the etheric portion here. And we have a greater influx of these negative entities from the abyss, from the lower spiritual planes, these dark powers that are trying to attach themselves to the human beings here because they're trying to avoid the day of judgment, essentially, is what's happening. So they want to hide within the human being and ride out the double cataclysm, which the alchemists claim is coming, and they want to emerge on the other side, disguised as the human being. And essentially what this equates to is the building of what Steiner calls the eighth sphere, or the Hermeticists refer to it as the world of shells. So this is a physical world devoid of spirit, wherein these dark powers can reside in an immortal physical body and live forever and be godlike and just seek out the desires of the flesh. And that's what's the attempt is being made here. This is what I've discovered through my research and through a lot of intuition and things like that as well. So it seems that this is kind of what's going on. And all of this relates to the whole concept of the Day of Judgment, wherein these two Enoch polarities, as I refer to them, will emerge. You'll have the black cube ascend from the abyss, and the white cube will descend from heaven, and they'll meet in the middle, and the cubes will open up. And at this point, this creates a situation wherein the white cube, the New Jerusalem described in the book of Revelation, is the ark of safety for humanity. And the black cube is wherein some of the darker forces, the fallen angelic beings, were imprisoned within in the underworld. So they're being loosed, and it says in the Bible they're going to be unleashed. The angel Apollyon, well, he's not really an angel. He doesn't classify as an angel, but he's something entirely different. Apollyon, the destroyer, will release these spiritual entities from the abyss at that time. So when this occurs, what their plan is they want to hijack that ark of safety. They want to hide in the human being and ride it out to safety in much the same way that the Noah's Ark story takes place. It's an ark of safety.
Yeah.
And all of this is what's encoded there. And this is even encoded on the Great Cross at Henday, Chris. This is, I spent a portion of the book breaking that down too. You have this Enoch polarity there. And it tells you in no uncertain terms that this seems to be the plan. And I found a lot of corroboration for this idea from a lot of other sources too. So it's all about connecting the dots to this. And I know that's a lot, and it's a bridge too far for some people to consider. But remember, I'm talking about how this will play out in the etheric. This is what it'll look like, the spirit side, not from the physical world side. Well, so what will this look like on the physical world side? That's open for interpretation.
Right. Well, as we were saying earlier, there is a slow breakdown of our morality, and seems that they're slowly attempting to chip away at our spiritual connection to God or Source so that it's easier to achieve what you were just saying and infiltrate that spirit completely.
Right, and on a nuts and bolts physical world level, this looks like the development of a digital sublayer of this reality. You see, the analog sublayer of this reality is the real etheric level of this world. They're building a cheap knockoff of that. They call it metaverse. They walked away from the metaverse terminology, but these Web3 technologies, this is exactly what they're building. They're trying to build a digital sublayer of this reality to actually work as the gateway instead of that analog version, which is the etheric portion of this reality. So they're building an artificial etheric layer in order to further attach these spiritual ideals to the physical body and build this world of shells, this eighth sphere, as Rudolf Steiner called it. And essentially what it is it's essentially a physical hell devoid of spirit, devoid of humanity. And it's all about the advent and the rise of the post-human era. And it's all transhumanism at the end of the day. That's what this whole philosophy is all about. And as much as I would like that to not be the case, it's always what I find every avenue I go down with it. It's these two same things. You have the occult side and you have the end game, which is the transhumanist singularity, which is the first fruits into this post-human state, this eighth sphere reality. And that's what the Antichrist is, the first fruits of the transhumanism movement.
Many that study the occult and the high-level individuals and groups involved with shaping society. Aleister Crowley comes up often. The rituals that he was performing with Parsons to bring about this new era, the Aeon of Horus. Do you think that, in part, that Crowley's rituals were essential to achieving some of the things that they have done?
He would like to have thought so, for sure. And that's most certainly what he was working towards. And I think there is a level of that is important. And what's encoded in some of what Crowley has put out there is important. And I touch upon this in the new book. It's a concept called the double altar. When you look at the double altar, it's a double cube, a black cube and a white cube stacked one on top of another. And it's all about the proportionality between them that goes on. And this harkens back to a Greek myth, the myth of Delos, and what's known mathematically as the Delian problem of doubling the cube. And I touch upon all of this in the book too. And this also connects directly to this Enoch archetype, because when you think of the Enoch polarity, think of a black cube and a white cube and the contradistinction between them. And this is even heavily encoded on the chessboard as well. It's all over Masonic lodges everywhere, and it's encoded everywhere. So it's something that is an archetype that is of primal importance, because it's about these building blocks within the etheric portion of this reality and how they bring spirit into manifestation into the physical. That's what it's about. So when you understand the Enoch polarity, it's about using these positive and negative polarized portions of the etheric realm to bring manifestation to the physical. It is the gateway, like I said. The etheric plane is the gateway between the astral and the physical. The astral being a stepping block down from the devacanic or mental plane first, which is the reflecting plane of all things spiritual. So this is how manifestation occurs in our reality. And most people would be totally lost on this and think I'm speaking absolute gibberish and nonsense. It's a bridge too far. But you have to understand the cosmogony that many of these dark occultists know and understand to be true. And this harkens is all recorded in the Rosicrucian works. It's everywhere else, too. That's the other thing. I've done comparative studies between the Rosicrucian systems, the Theosophist systems, the Jesuit systems, all the various other ones, the Order of the Golden Dawn. They all describe the same things. They just use different terminology to describe it. But I find clarity in the Rosicrucian system for describing how all of this stuff occurs and what's actually going on behind the scenes, veil with it. So
earlier you mentioned what's happening with this administration, Venezuela and Greenland. I've been looking at the technocracy movement from the 1930s. This was all mapped out back then in black and white. It seems that they just didn't have access to the level of technology necessary to achieve these goals. But we fast forward to today with everything this administration has done in a very short amount of time. Now Trump's talking about invading Greenland, which was a huge part of that technocratic movement and the part of the overall plan to unify these nations into a one world government controlled by science and technology. And where are we at right now?
Yeah, you have to look at all of that and understand, like, this has all been planned for a long time. They've had this stuff in mind for a very long time, and we see how all the dots seem to fall into place with this. But there's something deeper going on with Greenland, and I haven't quite put my finger on why it's so important. Now, they claim it's because they want to stave off the encroachment of Russia and China in the northern regions there. There's something deeper going on with that, and it's actually all encoded right in the name itself, Greenland. Well, if you're familiar with the phonetic Kabbalah, it's also called the Green language by the Freemasons. So there's something deeper going on. There's some spiritual significance to Greenland that they're looking at. There's some important portion within the etheric going on with Greenland. And this may have to do with energy patterns or some such thing. I don't know. I don't claim to have all the answers. But remember, back to the notion of ley lines and things like this, there are important energetic centers in various places in this world, and perhaps Greenland is one of those that's important right now in the time frame, the cycle of time that we're going through, because they are expecting some type of a large cataclysm. And this is all, like I said, this was all encoded on the cross at Henday, and this is all something that they've been talking about within the highest, most echelons of government and all of these other occult fraternities and stuff like that too for the longest time. They're expecting something. That's why they're building these underground bases and everything else. They know something will happen. And it may be something as physically apparent as a pole shift or something like that. I think that's the most probable thing we're looking at, because we do have a geomagnetic excursion happening right now.
Yeah.
It's been going on for a length of time. So all of this is all symptoms of the greater things going on in the spiritual realms, especially the etheric portion of this reality. We're seeing things to manifest now that already manifest there a while back.
Right.
So because of the time delay, it's happening now in the physical.
You mentioned the Cross of Henday. For those that may not be familiar, could you talk a little bit more about that and how it connects to what we're discussing?
Well, this is a monument that is located in a small town in Spain, and the alchemist, the modern-day alchemist known only as Fulcanelli, actually devoted an entire chapter that he added to the end of his book, The Mystery of the Cathedrals, at the end. It's encoded with alchemical symbols, and it represents the notion that there is a coming double cataclysm, and this is what has been talked about by the alchemists. This double cataclysm refers to some physical event, a world-shaking or changing event that may happen at some point in the near future that will cause a massive shift in our reality. And why is it referred to as a double cataclysm? It's because it's not just physical changes that will take place. There's something else going to manifest spiritually. And this all has to do, once again, with the Rosicrucian cosmogony, because it all has to do with the cycles of time and where we're at on the timeline of the Rosicrucian evolutionary scheme. So mankind is about to get a major upgrade in the very short coming future. What that looks like physically, I can't say for sure, but it's going to be wherein we will regain some of our lost spiritual senses that we have had in the past. So essentially, it's going to open up our experiences to more and more types of spiritual sensations, spiritual things. We're going to start seeing some very strange things happen that have never occurred before to us in the world we're used to. So all of this is what's encoded on that monument, and I actually went through the pains of breaking down a lot of it in the book. And this has been done. Go look at the works of Vincent Bridges and Jay Widener if you want to know more about this. A fantastic job analyzing all of it. So they give you a good groundwork to work on.
You mentioned after a cataclysm, humanity would start to become aware more of the spiritual nature of reality. And that makes complete sense because we're surrounded by this electromagnetic soup. We're distracted by all the technology, everything that we have been immersed in for decades. If all of that was to suddenly disappear and we're forced to be immersed in nature again, we would ultimately regain that connection after being severed from the toxic field of technology, basically.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it, but certainly, yes, we could see that that's the case. And I think there's actually going to be a slow, gradual process of the regaining of these spiritual senses. Now, according to the Rosicrucian system, man actually has 7 senses, but we only experience 5 of them currently because the other ones are still latent, but they'll be unlocked in this coming new cycle, which they call the Jupiter revolution.
Interesting.
So this is where we're at in the timeline. So it would take a whole show to break down the Rosicrucian cosmogony.
Well, not to divert us too much, but I think it connects to the level of technology that we're dealing with right now. I read an article about supposedly a security officer that was in Venezuela when we invaded and was reporting the level of technology being used and deployed against them. It was something he claimed out of a sci-fi movie. Frequency weapons, super soldiers with AI guidance systems firing up to 300 rounds a minute with accuracy they've never seen before, drones, people vomiting blood because of the frequencies being blasted. That's crazy, but it doesn't surprise me.
No, and that's the thing. All of those claims are based on actual working functional technologies that exist right now. But did this really happen, or is this all just part of the theater of the mind that they're trying to portray here? This is all described as Psy-War by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. If you go back and look at what he talked about, it's about winning the battle before you even have to fight or do anything. It's about the mind game. So it's about convincing your enemy you're unstoppable. That's what Psy-War does. So maybe this story being leaked in that way is part of Psy War, or maybe there are some real, actual nuts and bolts technologies that are being used in this way. I don't discount either possibility, or it's probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
In all likelihood. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about the technologies. We're there, man.
Yeah. Well, speaking of technology, how do you feel about the current state of AI, what it's being utilized for, how it's being misused, how fast and rapidly it's growing, and how long have they had access to this level of AI, if indeed they're always ahead, 50, maybe 100 years, our military-industrial complex, three-letter agencies? Have they had access to this a while, and has it been deployed as a weapon before?
I would answer probably yes. I don't have any direct evidence of that, but I would suspect, yeah, they've had it for a long time. They developed these things through the auspices of the military-industrial complex and the black budget programs over the course of time. So they've probably had a lot of these different technologies then. It's just the large-scale rollout of it limited what they could do with it at that point. So now it's large-scale rollout, and they're seeing in real time how your average person is using it. And I think they're coming up against a lot of barriers they weren't anticipating, because people, by and large, use it for a lot of stupid nonsense. And it's become to the point where it's been rolled out to such a degree now that it's actually kind of cannibalizing itself, this AI. And I'm talking about in terms of what they call in the industry hallucinations. And what it does is it's just a positive reinforcement loop. It tells the user what it thinks the user wants to hear, whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
And it just, bad information in, bad information out. And that's where we're at. We're at the point right now where you look on social media, you don't even know what's true anymore. You could watch a video of something happening, and it may look 100% real, but it's probably 100% AI driven and generated. And we wouldn't know the difference. It's the uncanny valley situation. And all of this has been weaponized psychologically against us. They don't want us to be able to know what's true. They want us to get to the point where it's like you don't believe anything anymore. So you need somebody, some authority figure to tell you what's correct and what's not. And who's that authority figure going to be? It's going to be the AI. That's what they want.
Yeah.
So they could control your perception of reality in this way. And that's exactly what this has done. And they've opened Pandora's box with it. And I do think there's a spiritual element stepping into the AI itself, as we had discussed here prior.
Some believe with access to things like the sentient world simulation that they have the ability to predict individual human behavior extremely accurately, and they've been using this for a long time. What are your thoughts on that?
No doubt. I mean, that's a real thing. Sentient world simulation is a project that's at Purdue University. It's run on an adiabatic quantum computer made by D-Wave that we discussed earlier, and there's classified portions of that program that they don't talk about. They're said to have a node for every individual on the planet.
Yeah.
They run a simulation of every individual. They could predict your behaviors with 90-some% probability of being correct. So when they have that level of technology at their disposal through using simulations, they could run all sorts of scenarios through that and figure out what's going to happen next, what's going on here in the future, right down to these individual nodes. And that's what they're trying to set up in real time. They're trying to set up the grand model of that, where they attach the human being themselves as a node to the system. And that's what's coming online with this beast system they're building, with this panopticon control grid they're putting in place. And this equates to the world of shells, or the eighth sphere, as Steiner called it, 1-to-1, in my view. So it's all about attaching a human being to the network.
Yeah.
So the hive mind.
It seems like as a collective, we have some big decisions to make. We have some decisions to make individually about what we're going to give our time to, how much we're going to interact with anti-human technology. Do you have hope for the level of awareness that we're seeing right now? Do you think more people are becoming aware? Because we have the false realm of what they show us on social media and online, and what's portrayed there is much different than what we're experiencing in reality, and we've all been kind of siloed into these echo chambers, so it's very difficult to get a feel for what your normal everyday person is looking at where they're leaning towards, how they feel about things unfolding. We are reflected, like you're saying, the things that we are interacting with and what the algorithm wants us to hear. But it's not until you go out into the real world and start interacting with people that you get a feel for where most people are at, and it's difficult to do that at times. So, do you have hope and any final thoughts?
Yeah, man, I have a huge amount of hope because we're making a difference. Programs like this going out there, people are listening and they resonate with it because they experientially, they know deep in their soul something's wrong. Something's very wrong in this world. And sometimes they can't quite put their finger on it, but they recognize the corruption. They recognize the deception everywhere now. And it's becoming more and more prevalent and obvious to people when you look out at things going on in the world. And you look on social media and you see all this AI-driven nonsense all the time, and you know it's all fake and gay, right? And that's the whole thing. So people are waking up to that more and more. So I have a huge amount of hope because now they're more apt to listen to things like what we're talking about here today than they were in the past. There was a time just a few short years ago where I would start talking about something like the Enoch polarity, and people would just shut down and their eyes would glaze over with the fluoride stare. And they'd just wander away and call me a tinfoil hat nut job or something, or say I'm crazy, or I'm just talking nonsense or fairy tales or something, and wouldn't even consider. Yeah. Well, now there's more people listening, and that's a hugely telling thing, because I think in the war of ideas, we're winning out because we're pointing out the obvious. We're pointing out the control system. We're pointing out the mechanisms that they're using, and we're predicting what their next steps are going to be because, let's face it, they're very predictable. They use the same playbooks and techniques and ideas all the time. And I've been pointing out the ways that they manipulate the metaphysical side of things to affect people too. And people are resonating with that and seeing what I'm talking about and able to pick up on it more. So there's no stopping an idea. That time has come. And I think it's time where we're standing at the crossroads. Do we want to go ahead and achieve our full potential as human beings, or do we want to take the transhumanist route, which leads to utter slavery and depravity and, well, basically building a physical eighth sphere hell for ourselves? Do we do that? Or do we want to advance spiritually to the next level? And it's all coming to that crossroads, that point where we have to make a decision. And the good news is it's an individual decision. Yeah. Each of us gets to make that choice, and each of us has to make that choice. And there's no avoiding it at a certain future time.
Right on.
So that is good news. And by and large, there's more people waking up to the nonsense and saying, hey, time out. Wait a minute. Some of these technologies are good, but they're being misused terribly.
Yeah.
And that's where we have the problem. So if we could rein in some of the control over the development of these technologies from these people that intend us harm with them, that's wherein I see a huge amount of hope in the coming future. And we can still do that.
Right on.
But we need to claim our sovereignty and our sovereignty and just find that hill that we want to stand our ground on. That's the important thing.
I agree, man. Keep up the amazing work. This is great information. Before I let you go, remind the audience how they can get more of you.
All right, Chris, thanks again. I always appreciate it. People could find me at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. Everything I do is centralized on the website, and I will be undergoing some maintenance on the website here very soon to try to make things easier for subscribers. And I'm hoping to actually make things better by doing that. But in the meantime, it might be a little work. So be patient with me.
Awesome, man. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to next discussion. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order. Hello friends, I am so excited to tell you about Independent Media Token. Independent Media Token is a brand new way to show your support for independent media without having to donate a dime. Independent Media Token is a cryptocurrency on the Solana blockchain designed to generate funds to promote and foster the growth of independent content creators, allowing them to engage in their art without having to worry about being demonetized. Through a network of media partners, of which you yourself can become a part of, Independent Media Token's goal is to ensure the powers that be can never cut off all of our areas of funding and censor the only free voices left in the world. Join the movement today. You can pick up Independent Media Token using Phantom Wallet or the Solana wallet of your choice, where you can easily swap your Solana for IMT. Grab some IMT today and remember to always know your team. To learn more, visit independentmediatoken.com or use the link right in the description. Are you and your family prepared for an emergency? Maybe the fake alien invasion? Now is the time to prepare yourself and your family for any event. Check out Prep Starts Now. Their mission is to provide high-quality preparedness products that empower individuals and families to be ready for any situation. They're committed to delivering reliable, trusted gear to ensure your safety, security, and peace of mind in times of need. Their product selection is carefully curated to provide you with the essential gear you need to stay prepared. From emergency kits to tactical tools, every item is chosen for its reliability and practicality. Prep Starts Now understands the importance of family, and their goal is to equip you with everything you need to build a solid plan for your family's preparedness. In today's ever-changing world, being prepared is more important than ever, and Prep Starts Now is here to help you and your family stay ready with quality products and practical guidance. Use the link in the description and get 15% off your order.